I have a story to share with our listeners and my co-host Aida and our guests. When I was doing my A level, me and my friends we had a discussion about our country's education system, and one of my friends suggested this idea that we should do away with arts and humanities subjects. He meant subjects like history, literature, language. He said these subjects are not important and therefore we should focus more on technical subjects like science and maths. Some would call it STEM.
That's a good
That's a
discussion.
bold,
That's and good and very bold discussion.
very bold
Farid.
suggestion.
We are back for the second episode of Life in the City podcast, and we have a prolific writer and professor with us today to share his views on arts and humanities subjects, whether they are less important than science and tech. Before we get into our episode today, we'd like to highlight some of our stories that are on Star Online and in the Star. Extreme weather is expected in Borneo again, Farid, and we know about the devastating floods that happen in that region. And in Metro, there is a story about greater transparency needed when it comes to contracts. And our FT minister has announced that they might revive Carcosa for the upcoming ASEAN delegation. That should be exciting. So, Farid, why don't you introduce our guest today?
Yes, so we have with us today Prof. Dr. Tajuddin Muhammad Rasdi, who is also Professor of Architecture at Tan Sri Omar Centre for Science, Technology and Innovation Policy Studies at UCSI University. Prof has agreed to be with us today to discuss this topic that we have. Perception versus reality, are arts and humanities subjects less important than science and tech? So thank you for joining us today, Prof.
Yes, Professor Tajuddin is not only a prolific writer, he is a speaker on architecture, politics, social issues, religion, education, and he is currently a columnist at the Star as well. He's also a professor of philosophy. Welcome, Prof. We're so happy to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. Yes.
Prof, if you don't mind, could you please just tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do? And also maybe tell us a bit about the columns you've been writing for us.
Oh, thank you very much. First of all, my background is, of course, people say, know as architecture. And I was educated in the United States for 6 years. And after that, my PhD in Edinburgh for 3 years. And I think much of the upbringing that I have been exposed to, actually, even from the very early beginning, was number one, the television, the black and white television. And before RTM has a lot of the Malay shows, you're subjected to all the Scooby-Doo. You probably don't know the cartoon Scooby-Doo.
I remember that.
All those. And then my favorite series of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, that sort of thing. So all this English speaking thing. And until the day came when I was able to read books, then I got caught up with all the Enid Blyton books. And this had led me to an understanding of the world as outside of just being a Malay as well as a Muslim. Now, when I was in the United States, I was exposed to a very important aspect of my life, which is the two of them. One, of course, the exposure to architecture, but the other thing is about the Islamic reform movement, what is called Islamic reform movement. So when I look back, the columns that I've been writing about is, you could say, something about a reflection on what it means to be a Muslim, and also what it means to be a Muslim in a world which is having all the aspect of science, having all this aspect of other interpretations of life, which you might call art or humanities, and also having this interpretation of how do we live with each other. The idea of religion then came to me is about respecting others. That the highest point of religion is about respecting others. Even though many people believe that religion is about your relationship with God, but I said you cannot establish your relationship with God unless you find it in your heart to actually appreciate and respect others. This is my own epiphany.
It's a multi-pronged approach, and what you were saying earlier, Farid, about how there is talk about sidelining arts and humanities subjects.
Yeah, so back to what I was saying about the discussion I had with my friends. So a couple of my friends actually agreed to that idea. You know, we should do away with literature subjects, with histories, moral studies, and that made me realize, that there is this perception among some segments of our community that, we should focus more or just only on science and math subjects because those are the subjects deemed important. And it just so happened that last week, or I think a few days ago, Aida came across this book, Resetting Malaysia, which was written by Prof.
Yes.
Resetting Malaysia, Education, Faith and Society. And in that, there's a chapter in which you wrote about how important it is to have a balance, You said that, arts and humanities subjects are just as important. So maybe, Prof, you can share a little bit with our listeners. Why do you think that is the case?
Well, first of all, if you turn on the news and much of the concerns now is usually about how we relate to each other, and whether it's about something called a race-related issue, or something called a religion-related issue. All these are what we call humanistic concerns. The idea of being human. What is the idea of being human? Part of the idea of human is being able to eat and procreate and all that, and the other part is about how to relate with one another. But of course, there is also the third part relating to some unknown idea about another power or another inspiration and things like that. So there are actually three parts to being a human being. Now, I find that our education is concentrating on the biological part, and perhaps it was right for our forefathers to actually concentrate on that in the early days. I remember during my time where we wanted to have this industrialized nation, I think under Dr. Mahathir, that became a reality. And that required learning about what your friend have said about all these things. Now, the assumption I assumed then, I guess, was that the society will take care of the so-called humanistic part because the school then will just operate on the survival, biological, economic part. But of course, then it doesn't happen that way. And the testament here is when we see what's happening in our country. I traced it to the idea that the education has not given emphasis to the so-called humanistic part, and also the idea of art, which is not really understood well by other people. They don't understand art in the manner that I understand art.
Yeah, there's a sentence in your chapter, Repositioning the Arts to Save a Nation. Well, you said you remember a professor of anthropology from a local uni who told you, if you can't do arts, then you do science. The arts require original thoughts and ideas. Will you explain to this
Yes.
about this, Prof?
Yeah, because for some reason, our industry-based education teaches not science. They teach what I call pseudoscience. It's not the real science. I read about real science, and real science have a lot of questions, even philosophical ones, about creation of the universe and all that. Our science is pseudoscience, the science of procedural aspect. Okay, so we are taught there is this problem, and therefore it requires one answer, and so that is how it goes. But in art, when you look at a piece of art, whether it's a building or a painting or a song, different people will appreciate different things because the solution or the product of the art works at a different level with the consciousness of the person. So that is a very matured and a very high level way of understanding a problem and looking at what is called solutions or responses. Not really solution, but I always call it responses. So a particular problem may have 10 different responses. And then even the question itself may not be phrased in that manner, or may be questioned whether it is relevant. So all these things are actually dealt with in what we call now as arts. And we have to be careful in using the word. In the olden days, there is no such word as science or arts or anything. You go to the Orang Asli, there's no such thing. You know, everything blends in together. The way they plant the tree, the way they carve this thing, the way they do this, it's all blended together. And if you ask Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps he wouldn't even know what science is. You know, I mean, it's part of the technology, the aesthetics, whether he's building a war machine or whether he's painting the Mona Lisa. So all those have the technology and the aesthetics and the emotions combining together.
Yeah.
What happens in the modern world, we separate things. You know, we separate this into this classification called the so-called industry and science, and then we separate this into something called the so-called arts, which is really not understood. I have one medical doctor friend who said, "You know, Prof, we didn't call it the science of medicine. We call it the art of medicine."
That's interesting.
Yes. So when I studied about art in school, I remember going into this one of the fundamental courses for all the students. You know, it's like a all university requirement. Everybody's in the engineers, wherever you are, you have to take this course in humanistic and about art. So art is partly also technology. When the technology becomes so refined, then it goes into art, because then it produces something that not only useful, but it's also something that is wondrous in that sense.
I remember during my time, we had to learn this. I think there's a component in Bahasa Melayu subject. I'm not sure if it's Bahasa Melayu or Bahasa Malaysia now, but there's a component there that says that is called Komsas, where we had to pick up a novel, read a novel, and then during exams we would have to answer questions based on that novels. So this friend of mine that I was talking about, he said that what's the point of learning that? What's the point of reading this novel and answering questions about it? But then I think about it, it also, these kinds of lessons, they help you to make sense of everyday problems. It's a humanity thing. You flick through the papers, the pages, all you see are people's emotions, people's opinions being intertwined with facts. So you need to have these kinds of subjects in school to help you become a full-rounded kind of person, I think.
Prof, maybe you can tell us, why does this perception why is this perception on our table now about arts and humanities? Negative perception.
The issue or the problem here is the non-appreciation of the subject of art and humanities. For instance, what is history? Is this a humanities subject or what? We all remember numbers of figures and heads, but actually history is the human experience. But history cannot be replicated.
Yeah.
So there was this big debate in the scholarly world in the 1800s or 1900s, I think. People were attacking history like what you said just now. What's the point of learning history? Doesn't put food on the table or something like that. So they tried to show that, look, history, if you study it long enough, you can actually understand and replicate and also predict things, because nothing is useful if you cannot predict things. Like science, you can predict like this, and then you can send someone to Mars or whatever. But history, they tried to put it, but actually you cannot. So what is the use of history then? Well, actually history is the thing that anchors us. But one thing you need to understand about history, it's supposed to be stories. I used to give an example. You ask your mother, was it painful for your birth or not? And you have to either the mother answers, oh, very very painful, or the mother will answer, alah, sikit saja. It depends on whether the mother wants something from you or not. If the mother wants you to visit her regularly, then she'll say, oh, lu sakit, that sort of thing. So it's a perspective of things. It's a perspective of experience, responding to things, and it's very important. So we have now a situation where there are people who complain about, let's say, the prime minister not doing this, not doing that, or delaying this or delaying that, as if they know what being a prime minister is all about.
That's true.
You know,
I
and
agree.
so I do try to, not appreciate my wife who's given birth to five children and all that. I don't try to look at how a woman looks at taking care of children. I see my daughter, very, meticulous about taking care of the child. I said men will only take care after they're 3 years old. Then there's a man problem. But the first 3 years, it's the woman. So this kind of empathy, like you said in the book, those are the experiences that actually mold us into this thing what I call the highest spiritual value, which is honoring and respect for the other. It doesn't matter whether the other is your wife, your children, somebody of not your race, or somebody. Ajahn Brahm, a Buddhist monk, said something beautiful. Who is the most important person in the world? And people couldn't. They answer all sorts of things, but actually, it's the person in front of you, at any time, at any place, at any situation. So if you are able to give the time and the care and the empathy to any person, well, that is actually the highest form of what we call kerohanian or jiwa. That's my perspective.
Is what you mentioned earlier before we started the podcast, Prof, about rebuilding the soft skills, right?
Yes. Well, people use the word soft skill. I don't really like the word. Like people use human resource. When did human become resource like the DJ Timah? I don't really like those words. You see, you let these people from economic decide what you say, then that's what happened lah. I don't use the word.
Aida was it's an interesting point you raised about where did this perception come from, and it reminds me of a time when I was in school after PMR. So like in my school, we were given a choice where, or at least we thought we had a choice after PMR. Depending on how well you did, you would be divided into the science stream or the art stream.
Or the commerce?
In my school, I believe the commerce was in the art stream.
Okay.
And so those who did well, or at least did relatively well compared to the other students in that school, were automatically absorbed into the science stream. And then those who didn't do as well would go into the art stream. So there was always this perception that, kau budak pandai, kau tak berapa pandai. So we had that perception. So it was so ingrained in us that it took me years to, I think, extricate myself from it, because I saw my sister who went, well, at least I think she tended to do really well in the arts and humanities subjects, and when she went to university she did really well. So I thought it doesn't mean that people who actually preferred arts more are stupid. I don't think that's a word we should ever use to describe people, but my point is
inferior,
that
the perception is inferiority.
That's probably where the perception comes from. I think that there were subjects in the arts streams that I would have wanted to take then, but I wasn't allowed to because I was already absorbed in the science stream.
Well, I think that one is it's not, as I said, fault finding is not my the intention here, but I think it was a situational aspect where, as I said, the country is going to be industrialized, and we thought that would be economic prosperity equals to happiness. That was the idea lah. And economic prosperity means you can work the industry, be the engineer, be all these things, and therefore then you will have a wonderful life. Okay, so they decided therefore that importance must be given to the science stream, and I don't think that is a wrong decision to take. The wrong decision was when you let things go on and on and on without checking back.
Yeah,
itu yang problemnya. As I said just now, everything in the past or in history has a situational context. Now, once the situation is no longer there, then you need to
Review
move
it.
on lah.
Yeah.
Okay, but here then you get stuck with, then siapa nak masuk MRSM? That sort of thing, like this business about examination, whether you should have exam or not. The concern here is not whether my child will be clever or not, whether so can she be chosen to MRSM or not, or whether this kind of classification as if going to MRSM is better. Okay, so that is where I think our mistake was not to look at the situation. But it becomes very difficult now with all the politicization of, about religion, about science, about maths, and all these things. So we're stuck in a quagmire where we don't have a strong situation to actually do anything.
Is this perception of the inferiority of arts and humanities prevalent in certain segments of society, Prof, do you think?
95% of the parents. Okay, the parents don't really care what you learn at the university. They only care that you get your degree and get a job, and then that sort of thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that you need to learn is to learn from everyone.
Yeah, you said this earlier, Prof. Arts is rarely singular, and it's rarely from a single source of information. It's part of a bigger. It's about a bigger part of humanity. Can you explain that?
Well, not only art, even if you want to talk about science also, there's seldom a singular, what we call, origin of things. If you look at any language, it doesn't really come from a single source. Like the Malay language itself, if you were to agree with Kasim Ahmad, who published the Hang Tuah, from, I think, 9 different civilizations, Javanese, Portuguese, Arab, Indian, all these things. So that shows that nothing exists in a singular manner. Only the bigotry of our minds exists like that. But in number one, in language, it doesn't exist in a singular manner. In artwork, like the keris, you're talking about the keris, you can trace all sorts of things from there. And even your blood comes from every single part of the human existence.
Yeah. Well, we can get to the part of character building, Prof. So, why do you think arts and humanities, the subjects of arts and humanities, must be given more priority now?
Well, number one, if you were to use the word art to say things like reading a story or a writing by another culture, okay, and I think this exercise should be, you were reading another Malay book, probably another Malay context. Well, if we can read about, say, the Chinese civilization or the Indian civilization, and have people understand that, without some religious scholar saying, "Oh, ini menyesatkan," well, then we can empathize with a lot of people and a lot of issues. I do not think that we need a lot of technology or industry anymore, because a lot of the things are taken up by computers and all this technology that we already have. What we do need is how to use this technology to bring us closer together. Certainly, well, there are some people who say if we are arguing with each other, then it's good for business. Well, that's for the arms industry, okay? But for other industries, better to be together. You have a larger market, and you have larger influence. And if you are in trouble, you can get somebody to help you. If somebody's in trouble, of course, you will extend your help. I mean, if that's not what if you read Yuval Noah Harari said that why is it that Homo sapien was able, in only very short time, become superior than all these dinosaurs and all these other animals that are bigger and much stronger? It's simply because they can share something that they cannot see. Say if you try to tell the monkey, "Hey, monkey, if you share your banana, you'll go to heaven," the monkey is not gonna pay attention, But the humans, they will accept that.
I remember reading about this, about the invention of writing or alphabets, because it means that it allowed us to pass whatever knowledge we've discovered today to our future generations. Animals can't do that. What they know now is what they can use now. So I think that this is the similar concept that you're talking about.
Yes, because that is, and then when I have a lecture called for all PhD students, my first lecture is deconstructing and reconstructing knowledge, the lies we live with in our society. I tell them that what you have been living in is based on lies, and lies to me are something that is not challenged. you receive historical narratives. They are all received in school and all that. If you don't question that, question doesn't mean you disagree with it.
Right.
It simply means you question and you reformulate
It's a
it.
discourse.
Yeah, so that's what will happen in the PhD. You need to deconstruct whatever that has been the issue, and then understand it in a certain way, and then you put it together in perhaps another way, or in another what we call body of knowledge that is already accepted, and then fill in the gaps here and there, or you just forget, put it on the one side and then build your own body of knowledge. So that's the process of knowledge. So knowledge is not truth. Knowledge is simply a conglomeration of things that you take and then reformulate it into something that you can pass on. And that's the with the help of what we call writing and all that. And writing transfers knowledge, but knowledge, as I said, is not necessarily true.
It's the perception of the
It's
knowledge
a perception
that you have
of
gained.
whatever the person has, and that is where human ingenuity, human development comes, by questioning that and then reformulating, and then some other people re-question that balik and reformulating.
Prof, can we perhaps discuss the impact of this perception on children's development? So when we, allow this perception to go unchecked that, arts and humanities subjects are less important than STEM subjects. So what impact will it have on our children's development?
Well, I always say thank God for YouTube, because if I hear my grandchildren talking from their teachers, I get very worried. But when I listen to them talking about their YouTube, I'm okay. Opposite to their mother, of course, says you have too much YouTube. I said no. But the point here is that because you have this YouTube and this exposure to knowledge. In our time, it's the Annie Brighton books, it's the Disneyland books, it's all these books that you find in the library, and then you just devour them and you become a wider person, what I call orang yang lebih berlapang dada. Okay, so that is the situation with these children that I can see.
Can I share my experience a bit here?
Sure.
Funny that you should mention engineering just now, because in your previous answer to us you mentioned the word engineering, because that's what I studied in the university. And now I'm a journalist. But when I was in university, I took part in debating. I was competitive debating. I represented my university around the UK and did debating. So studying engineering, I was used to having definite answer to a question. So people mention, calculate the amount of gas.
Yeah.
There's you use ideal gas theory and then you get the answer. But in debating, I was involved in a lot of discussion about economics, politics in the UK, and so I got involved with students from other backgrounds. And in those areas of studies, it is very unlikely that you're going to get a definite answer. So a lot of the times it involves humans, and humans are not predictable. Humans are not things you can put in an Excel spreadsheet. So understanding human nature and all that, I think that's also a training in humanity. Debating, it's something outside the classroom. So I think I have I look at things different, like on two different spectrums. On one hand, there's this discipline that I got thanks to my engineering background, but then I also look at things differently because of my extracurricular involvement. So I feel like a lot of these humanities subjects, they help complement you. They give you these skills to look at things in a more well-rounded manner. You don't look at things like what you said, like straight line. Okay, there's a definite answer to something. More often than not, that it's actually a lot of things around us are actually a lot more nuanced than they seem. So I think if students get this idea that humanities subjects are not important, then they'll become robots. They are less willing to consider different views. They are less willing to explore ideas that have not been indoctrinated in them early on. So that will impede their development early on. So that's my take.
Yeah. What I'm worried about as a professor who's reading a lot of PhD, you're talking about children just now. I'm worried about PhD graduate. Okay, now there is a trend to make everything in terms of this kind of a spreadsheet idea. For instance, how do you evaluate heritage? For me, evaluating heritage is a very philosophical thing. But here they dumb it down to some sort of spreadsheet and identify the so-called whatever values that you plate to it, and then do some interviews, put up some spreadsheet or percent and things like that, and then see which number comes up bigger. That's it.
Sort of devaluing the heritage.
So I wonder if I did that to my wife, what would it come out? No?
It's a qualitative thing, not a
Yeah.
quantitative thing.
Yeah, so I don't mind the quantitative thing. Let's say you want to find out what, let's say, the ordinary citizen thinks. But here we're talking about heritage. Okay, heritage is about how you view yourself in the future, in relation to others, in relation to the. It's a as I said, philosophy. Philosophy is about putting a lot of things together in one. Science seems to be about trying to make things smaller. Actually, science is not like that. Real science is actually putting a lot of things together also. Because I read, Stephen Hawking, Michio Kaku, all these scientists, they put a lot of things together. Okay, so this is where we are at a disadvantaged. The idea of separating things like geography, for instance, like learning geography. I mean, the most boring subject to me was geography. Because you're learning.
Why was it boring to you,
It was
Prof?
only because you have to learn about this, how many tons of this, and why. Actually, it is supposed to be a very humanistic subject because it talks about the economy. I used to think economy is about money. No, economy is about the best use of resources in order to survive. So it's very human thing, very human thing. But our economy reduce things to facts of tonnage and production, but does not relate to the people. In certain areas, let's say tourism, why is it successful tourism? Because of their identity, heritage, and all that. And then over here is this the production of something, the plantation. Well, it's related also to the community. So it is taken out. And then it's only discussed how much is produced, how much does it cost, how much does it so-called help the nation in this kind of a big business venture. Same thing with history. History is reduced to events and also years and specific things that you should know about it, not about experience itself.
Minus the storytelling.
Yeah, minus the storytelling. So it's treated as if a definitive thing. Eckhart Tolle, one of my great spiritual teachers in terms of his book, he would say, when you name a thing, you think you know, but actually you don't know.
I'm sure you make it exciting in your classes, Prof.
Yes, of
With
course.
your PhD students.
That's right. For my class, I always say this is the only place where you can ask anything, and then we can actually learn together.
I think that's also important about making your students feel adequate enough for them to put forth their views on the subject at hand, right? And so as to not make them feel undervalued.
It's not about feeling. When you come to my stage of understanding knowledge, as I said just now, I begin to respect knowledge, and not in the sense of, in this clinical manner. Knowledge of whatever it is, whether it's some sort of science, some sort of industry, some sort of religion, some sort of thing, always also has the experience of the other person. So whether you come from this background, you're Chinese, you're Indian, that's a different background. You come from the kampong, come from the urban, that's another different. You have these friends and all this, and then you have a certain talent, that's another thing. So I've come to appreciate the learning that I get from my students. So that's why when I ask young lecturers what is education, and they always tend to think that it's an imparting of knowledge. I said that may be so in the school, but not so in the university, because the university is the place that you don't know. The university is the place where it does not know anything. Some people say, but isn't the university the place where you know? No. It is the place where you don't know anything, means you already crossed the boundary of whatever that's there. And that's where you become humble when the more knowledge you acquire, the more you do not know. It's like a cone. The cone gets wider when you go higher. So the even though the angle is the same, but the area around the cone is bigger. So that is where the humility must come with the university. So this is where I appreciate knowledge coming from different individuals, because that is part and parcel of the journey and the growth. It will never end, and that is also another fact that we must understand, that true knowledge does not end.
Prof, let's talk about how can we rewrite the narrative. How can we change this perception, that arts and humanities subjects are less important? What can we as a community do to fix this?
I think all of this should start, as I said, at the university. See, the problem with our university is not just governed by university professors like me. It's governed by this MQA, something called qualification agency. Then it's governed by architecture professional bodies or these other institutions and things like that. Now, first you need to have a leadership of university that understands the idea of knowledge being one, and that all aspect of knowledge is for the vitality of human existence. You cannot and you can never say this is more important like that. It's like you have 5 children, which is more important. The one that is, if you can answer that, then you're a damn horrible parent. Okay, because that's not the right answer. Okay, so you need that leadership first. It's not really easy to do a top-down way now with the social media.
We'll take your word for it, Prof. Because Farid and I, neither of us are parents. So when you said about the parenting thing, that's interesting.
So it has to start at the university, where, like I said, the curriculum of engineering, right? Mana tak ada pun pasal art. How do you know you might engineer the future art? But art is always looked upon as something frivolous or extra. So-called the scientific method is now king, meaning you have to deconstruct things, put your spreadsheet, and then all these things, put in the numbers, and then you get your PhD. I said, what happened? What's wrong with having a question at the beginning of the PhD and coming up with 10 other questions at the end of the PhD? Nothing wrong with that, because patutnya a PhD is a critical analysis. You're not supposed to have answers if you don't have them. So that is a perception that is not popular at the moment.
What roles can the private sector and communities play in this aspect?
I think we need a society, perhaps away from our education system. I'm glad that we have a lot of private schools, like international schools and all that. And of course, not everybody can afford to do that. But if we could actually engineer in such a way of just introducing children and not just children, I'm not worried about children, actually worried about university graduates, to actually be exposed to, especially reading and the reading of other things. And if it cannot be done at the university, then I don't know how you can do it in a perhaps you can offer them some nice place as the hotel, in a workshop or something, and then something for them for their CV. You're going to have to do things like that, because they're definitely not going to come, just to have this kind of situation unless it works something for them. So it's either a credit for them or a CV or some sort of job opportunity and all that. So we are in a very, very difficult situation, because the parents are already been educated in that manner, and that is, and also the worst part of it is we don't have philosopher professors.
We don't,
because if philosopher professors, then you write a book saying, look, this is what happened in 50 years down the road. These are the situations of society. These are the situation of economics. These are the situation of maybe what is called the job market and things like that. We don't have people like that. We have 20 professors in their silo group, okay, and they think they are great because they think they're great because they've been awarded so many accolades, okay, and therefore they keep within their silo. And this thing will go on and on and on. So that is the problem. Maybe the employers, who will start talking about these things, this aspect of different kind of thinking. Now that one might actually spur something.
I think if I can offer one last nugget of information or at least opinion here, is that I read somewhere, and I think you probably have come across this too. Jobs that would exist 20 years from now, we probably don't know what those jobs are going to be, and the skills that will be required for those jobs may not have been. I mean, we may not have been invented yet, or so my advice to parents or would be parents is that if you think I want my children to excel in this subject or in these subjects, because I want them to be an engineer, I want them to be a doctor. Here's the thing though, you don't know what skills are going to be needed in 20 years from now. So it's best that you let your child be as well-rounded as they possibly can be. That's how I see it, So yeah.
But I don't think they see it that way lah, because
hopefully our podcast will make them see it that way.
And it's what a lot of us are facing now. 20, 30 years ago, we didn't know that AI would accelerate this fast, right?
A very interesting question that somebody asked, barely 7 years ago to me. Will AI take over our jobs? This graduate asked. My answer was immediate. I said yes. Why yes? Because I know what you learn in the university, and it's easy to replicate. But no one can replicate Professor Tajuddin because my thinking is so wide that I don't think the AI can make sense of it. All right? So that is why these jobs will then, as I said, will be replicated, and then you'll say things like you will be out of a job. And this is the problem in our country, where we are at the tail end of things. We wait for somebody else to do things, and then we just latch on to that. I read about some countries who have nothing, no agriculture, no nothing, and suddenly they create a place where people would like to come and visit, do trails, campings, and then they just live off this thing. I thought it's just a side income, but when I studied it, it's a whole load. When you go to this mountain, you can't even plant anything like in Norway.
Yeah.
But then all these houses and stuff in the middle, and the camping grounds, these are making millions of money. You're not even afraid of the pandemic, because you're in the outdoor. So the appreciation of nature and the appreciation of their own culture are those that actually generate the income.
Well, this has been an interesting conversation. Any parting thoughts, Farid?
Well, stay tuned.
I
think that there's a lot to take in, Prof, but it's very insightful.
Yes, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be back for the next third episode, and that will be an interesting topic as well. Be sure to catch the Life in the City podcast on our YouTube channel, at The Star Online and thestar.com.my/metro.